Marcus Harrison stood in his marble-floored foyer, his face twisted with rage as he stared at the shattered remains of his grandmother's antique vase. The crystal fragments sparkled like diamonds across the pristine white tiles, each piece reflecting his mounting fury. Clara Martinez, his trusted housekeeper of 5 years, knelt beside the wreckage, her hands trembling as she tried to gather the irreplaceable pieces. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was an accident. The phone rang, and I turned too quickly. I never meant." "Never meant." Marcus's voice thundered through the mansion's grand hallway. His dark eyes burned with an intensity that made Clara shrink back. "That vase was worth more than you make in a year. It belonged to my grandmother, and now it's destroyed because of your carelessness." Clara's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. Desperation etched across her weathered face. She had worked tirelessly for this man, arriving before dawn and leaving after sunset, maintaining his pristine home with dedication that went beyond duty. Her calloused hands spoke of years spent polishing his floors, washing his clothes, and preparing his meals with meticulous care. "Please, sir, let me explain," she pleaded, still on her knees among the crystal shards. "I can pay for it. I'll work extra hours, take a pay cut, anything you want. This job means everything to me and my children." But Marcus had already made his decision. His pride, wounded and inflamed, demanded satisfaction. He saw only the broken vase, not the broken woman before him. His wealth had built walls around his heart, making him blind to the human cost of his anger. "Get out," he said coldly, his voice like ice. "Pack your things and leave immediately. Don't expect a reference letter. Don't expect anything from me ever again." Clara's world crumbled faster than the vase had shattered, but Marcus had already turned away, his expensive shoes crunching over the fragments of both crystal and trust. 3 months had passed since that terrible day, and Clara's life had spiraled into a nightmare she never could have imagined. The woman who once walked through Marcus Harrison's mansion with quiet dignity now sat in a cramped, moldy apartment, staring at another rejection letter. Her savings had vanished like morning mist, consumed by rent, utilities, and the endless need to feed her 2 young children. "Mama, I'm hungry," 7-year-old Diego whispered, tugging at her worn dress. His little sister Sophia, barely 4 years old, clutched a threadbare doll, her big brown eyes filled with confusion about why their world had suddenly become so cold and empty. Clara's heart broke a little more each time they asked for food she couldn't provide. She had knocked on every door in the city, applied for every cleaning job, every restaurant position, every opportunity that might put bread on their table. But the question always came, "Why did you leave your last position?" And when potential employers discovered she had been dismissed without a reference, their faces would close like shuttered windows. The rental assistance had run out. The food pantry visits were becoming more frequent. Clara found herself doing things she never thought possible, searching through discount bins for expired food, mending the same clothes over and over, and lying awake at night calculating whether she could afford both heat and groceries. Her children's laughter, once the music of her world, had faded to whispers. Diego had stopped asking about new toys or treats. Sophia had grown quieter, her bright spirit dimmed by the weight of poverty that pressed down on their small family like a suffocating blanket. Clara stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, seeing a stranger with hollow cheeks and desperate eyes. She had always been proud, always maintained her dignity even in service. But desperation was stripping away everything she had once been, leaving behind only a mother's fierce determination to survive. Tonight, she would have to make an impossible choice: pay the electric bill or buy groceries. Either way, her children would suffer, and Marcus Harrison slept peacefully in his mansion, never knowing the destruction his moment of anger had unleashed. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Marcus Harrison's pristine driveway as he stepped out of his black Mercedes. He had just returned from a business meeting that had added another $1 million to his already vast fortune, and his mind was focused on the day ahead. But something unusual caught his eye: movement near his ornate iron gates that shouldn't have been there. What he saw made his blood freeze in his veins. A woman in tattered black clothing was on her hands and knees, frantically digging through an overturned garbage bin. Her dark hair hung in dirty strands around her face as she clutched soiled papers and envelopes to her chest like precious treasures. For a moment, Marcus couldn't process what he was seeing. Then recognition hit him like a physical blow. Clara. The name escaped his lips in a strangled whisper. The woman's shoulders tensed, but she didn't look up. Her hands moved more desperately now, gathering every scrap of paper, every piece of cardboard that might have value at the recycling center. When she finally raised her head, Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. The proud, dignified woman who had once maintained his home with quiet grace was gone. In her place knelt a hollow-eyed stranger, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her clothes hanging loose on a frame that had grown gaunt with hunger. The transformation was so complete, so devastating, that Marcus felt physically sick. "What are you doing here?" he managed to ask, his voice harsher than he intended, shame making him defensive. Clara's laugh was bitter and broken. "What does it look like?" "I'm collecting anything worth a few cents. Bottles, cans, paper. Anything they'll pay me for at the recycling center. It might buy us bread for today." The casual way she spoke of such desperation, as if scavenging through garbage had become routine, hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. He remembered firing her in a fit of rage over a broken vase, something he could have replaced without thinking. Now she was literally crawling in the dirt outside his mansion, reduced to this unimaginable degradation. "You shouldn't be here," he said weakly, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Where else could she go? What other choice had he left her? Clara's eyes blazed with a fury that made Marcus step back instinctively. She rose slowly from her knees, still clutching the filthy papers, and for the first time since her dismissal, she looked directly into the face of the man who had destroyed her life. "Where should I be, Mr. Harrison?" she asked, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "Did you think I would simply disappear? That the world would magically open its doors for a woman you threw out without a reference?" Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Clara wasn't finished. The words poured out of her like water through a broken dam, months of anguish and desperation finally finding voice. "Do you know what happens to a housekeeper who gets fired without cause? Every job I applied for wanted to know why I left. When they learned I was dismissed without a reference, they saw me as damaged goods. Your word, your single moment of anger, branded me as untrustworthy across this entire city." The truth hit Marcus like physical blows. In his rage, he had never considered the ripple effects of his decision. He had simply wanted her gone, wanted his anger satisfied, never thinking about how she would survive. "My children haven't had a proper meal in weeks," Clara continued, her voice breaking. "We were evicted from our apartment. We sleep in a shelter when there's space, and on park benches when there isn't. I've sold everything we owned, my mother's jewelry, my wedding ring, even Diego's bicycle. And still it's not enough." Just then, two small figures emerged from behind a nearby hedge. Marcus's breath caught in his throat as he saw them, a boy of about 7 and a little girl barely past toddling age. Their clothes were patched and dirty, their faces thin with hunger, their eyes wide with the premature wisdom that poverty forces on children. "Mama," the boy called out uncertainly. "Are you okay?" Clara immediately softened, her anger replaced by protective love. "It's all right, Diego. Come here, bring Sophia." The children ran to their mother, and she gathered them in her arms, her body shielding them from the harsh reality of their situation. Marcus watched this display of maternal love and felt something break inside his chest. These innocent children were paying the price for his moment of prideful rage. "Now do you see?" Clara whispered, her voice raw with pain. "Do you see what your broken vase cost us?" Marcus Harrison, the man who had built an empire through ruthless determination, fell to his knees on his own driveway. The weight of what he had done, the complete destruction of an innocent family over his wounded pride, crushed down on him like an avalanche. Tears streamed down his face as he finally understood the true magnitude of his cruelty. "God forgive me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I never knew. I never thought." The children stared in amazement at the powerful man crying before them. Little Sophia tugged at her mother's dress and whispered, "Mama, Why is the man sad? Clara held her children closer, her own tears mixing with theirs. Because he finally sees what he did to us, she said quietly. Marcus looked up at her through his tears, seeing not just a former employee, but a human being whose life he had carelessly destroyed. I can't undo what I've done, he said, his voice raw with emotion. But please, let me try to make it right. Not because you work for me, but because I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. With trembling hands, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his house keys. The simple act felt monumental, a bridge across the chasm his pride had created. Come inside, he said, extending the keys toward her. Not as my employee, but as a family I wronged. Let me give you back your dignity, your security, your future. Clara stared at the keys for a long moment, her heart torn between the anger that had sustained her and the desperate hope for her children's salvation. Finally, she reached out and took them, her fingers closing around the cold metal. This doesn't erase what you did, she said firmly. It doesn't take away the nights my children went to bed hungry, or the shame of living in shelters. I know, Marcus nodded, but it's a beginning. Let me prove that I've learned from this terrible mistake. Let me show you that wealth doesn't have to make a man blind to suffering. As Clara gathered her children and walked toward the mansion that had once been her workplace, Marcus followed behind them, no longer the proud millionaire, but a humbled man beginning the long journey toward redemption. The broken vase had cost him far more than money. It had nearly cost him his humanity. Now, perhaps, they could both find a way to heal from the fragments of their shattered lives.